Norm Miller, August 11th, 1931. I was born in what now is Miller Plumbing, 6018 East Henrietta Road. When we were kids, we'd either go fishing in the creek, swimming in the creek, catching turtles, all kinds of things at the creek. When the mill burned, there's a whole bunch of us, Charlie Bach, John Lozier, Hans Stover, Herbie Banks, my brother John, and 2 or 3 others. We sat on the roof of our barn at the homestead, which is across the creek, and watched what was going on.
Wow.
And it was hot with the heat coming from it. My brother Gordy, he worked at the mill at that time. He tried to go in and turn off the siren, which was on the chimney of the mill, and it kept blowing and blowing and blowing and blowing, and he finally went in and turned it off. Rush really hasn't changed that much as far as the population is concerned. It was about 3,000 back then. It's about 3,600 now. Back then, everybody knew everybody else. I mean, most people grew up in Rush, and then the families stayed together. Actually, I was related to about half the town. People watched over everybody else, and you couldn't get away with a lot, although we did. We did a lot of little pranks. We had 2 numbers, 2 digits for our phone number, and it was a party line. So when the phone rang, it rang either 1 digit or 1 ring or 2 rings or 3 rings or 4, depending on who it was for. You could pick it up and listen to conversations of somebody else, which is rather interesting. We'd go from one end of the town to the other, and by the time we got home, our parents knew what we did. Growing up, I saw things differently than some of my friends. And I think that's one reason I went into teaching, because I could see, the broad picture as opposed to some narrow focus. I was going to be an elementary school teacher, but I liked junior high better, so I ended up in junior high. Everybody was eligible for the draft, and I was eligible for the draft, but with being in college, and you could apply for a deferment, which I did. I graduated in June of '53. I got my draft notice to report on September 17th, 1953. I didn't want to be a paratrooper. Well, they kept putting pressure on. They wore me down, so I signed up. And we had a day off on Memorial Day, and we played volleyball in the courtyard. And I went up to spike a ball, came down and blew my knee out. So they finally decided they needed to do surgery, because I'm still suffering with that knee at the present time.
So no jumping out of airplanes, I guess.
No jumping out of airplanes. That washed me right out, immediately. My first job at Wheatland Shiloh, I recall I was in a faculty meeting one time talking about, kids with learning problems. And, we had quite a conversation, and a lot of the teachers didn't understand. Well, the psychologist came up to me afterwards. He says, "Where did you learn all of that information about learning disabled kids?" I said, "In education classes in college." He says, "You're head and shoulders above some of the other teachers that are here." One of my goals was to come back to Rush Henrietta to teach. We had 29 kids in our class. By the time I came back, they were up around 600 in a class. Today, the idea is the teacher has to be a friend of the students. Back then, the teacher was one step above the students, and the students respected the teachers like they did the parents. Of course, they don't respect the parents today either, so there's a whole different attitude. Matter of fact, that's one of the key elements, in my opinion, in society, and that's attitude. when I was in college, one of the professors said, when you get a teaching job, don't smile until Christmas. It was an exaggeration, but the idea was, you've got to command respect. If you don't command respect, you've got a problem. I recall one time I was walking down the hall and there were 3 or 4 or 5 boys ahead of me. Here comes Stormin' Norman, here comes Stormin' Norman. Look out, if his face is red, watch out. And I kind of liked that name because it had a lot of implications. It was towards the end of the year. This is when I was a teacher at Roth. And towards the end of the year, I was having a sample test to prepare for the final exam. Well, without realizing it, I gave them the final exam because I had it all prepared and got it mixed in with others. And after I realized what I did, I said, well, I'm going to give it to them again at the end of the year and see what happens. And there wasn't much difference. There wasn't much difference. And those that did well, did well. Those that didn't do well, didn't do well. Even though they'd been exposed to it 3 or 4 weeks before the exam. No, I've never told anybody that. I mean, that was something that I kept to myself. But it was an interesting experiment, I thought. Now, one of the things that I feel is most important for anybody, one of them is attitude, positive attitude especially. Another is faith. I have faith in God, but you can have faith in a lot of things, and perseverance. Those 3 things, if you have those, you'll be successful, in my opinion.